This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Jeremy Wolf.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Good Neighbor Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Wolf, and today we're having a little bit of a party this morning. It's bright and early, 8 a.m. on a glorious Wednesday, and I am joined by three lovely individuals that have a business that I really have never heard about, so I'm excited to get into this. I'm joined by Elizabeth Stabinski, Jon Stief, and Adam Schulman, and I think I just nailed all the pronunciations, didn't I?
You nailed it.
Okay, good. Batting 100 early on, which is unusual for me at 8 in the morning. But anyway, so Elizabeth, Jon, and Adam joined me from InDivorce, and rather than me kind of get in and give you a little bit of background, I'm going to go ahead and shift this to them so they could explain a little bit about what they do. So, guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Of course, our pleasure. And thanks, as always, to our listeners for tuning in to learn more about our great community and the businesses that serve us. So without further ado, somebody take the lead. Let's go. Tell us a little bit about InDivorce, what you guys do, because I find it very interesting.
I'll start.
All right, Elizabeth, take the lead.
So basically, we all came to this area of work through our own experiences, but we all wanted to help people transition through the divorce process with the least amount of conflict and cost. And unfortunately, when people think of divorce, they think of conflict and cost. Yep. And so coming from our unique backgrounds, we met each other in this search for something better. And we've come up with a process that allows for couples to work with their own individual support that is trained in communication and mental health. Adam and I both have mental health backgrounds, and we work with Jon, who has forensic accounting and a law background, to help this couple do all the necessary things they need to do in order to file for divorce as sanely and inexpensively as possible.
Very interesting. It sounds like a collaborative effort. It sounds like a way to take a lot of the, I guess, hostility and a lot of the negative emotions that naturally come with a separation, with a divorce, and kind of work more in like a team environment with both couples. So very, very interesting. I'd never even heard that this concept exists. So who would like to chime in next? What do we got here?
Essentially, that is what we are trying to do, and what we're trying to focus on is to reduce the focus of the negativity and on the things that are going to ultimately annoy people and make them defensive. I would say that this is an alternative divorce process that is focused on the family and focused on the spouses. And like Elizabeth likes to say, a divorce, most people think that it is a legal event. And while it is, it entails a lot of other things from an emotional standpoint and a financial standpoint that people really need to be trained in order to help their clients or help the spouses work through the divorce. So we wanted to find a process or a method that would help those people work through it. So Adam, what is your thought?
Yeah, so I think at least I speak for Elizabeth and I as mental health professionals, kind of working with families for almost 30 years and watching sort of the process of divorce be driven by a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty. And so in the search through that, a lot of times what couples do is they are sort of driven to believe that the only way through that fear and uncertainty is through a legal process that is often adversarial and far from collaborative. And so we really are invested in trying to navigate that or help couples navigate that differently, because as anybody who's gone through divorce probably recognizes, while the family structure changes, there's still a family present, and a family present that often meets for holidays and celebrations and all sorts of stuff moving forward that at least we hope in our process helps them to do that a lot more constructively.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds wonderful in theory, the idea, but in my mind, you got to help me clear this up. I'm thinking like most people that have gotten to the point where they're deciding to get a divorce, there's so much contention there, and we're human beings, right? Everybody's looking out for their own interests. So people are like, "Well, I need my own attorney to protect specifically my interest," and there's this feeling of there's a lot of hostility there, right? And do you also represent clients that fit that bill, or is this more for people that are already collaborative that maybe have been working with you in the past for like mental health counseling or gone to therapy, it just didn't work out? How does one end up working with you, with your team?
Yes.
So,
the answer to all of those questions is yes.
Yes,
I'll start.
I think go ahead. You want to go, Adam?
Well, no, I'll go. Jon will go first.
Okay.
A lot of people will say, so one thing that we hear a lot is we just want something fair. We want a fair resolution, right? I just want a fair agreement. The problem with the word fair is it's subjective and no one knows how to actually define it.
Yeah.
And so ultimately what we try to do is help people understand the different possibilities or outcomes and help them define their fair, but actually understand and realize that most of the time, while people are looking out for their own self-interest, that their intention isn't to necessarily hurt their spouse. And that's lost in translation a lot in litigation because it comes off, that desire to protect one's self-interest comes off as an attack on the other person. Why? Because, well, for one, a lot of people who wind up talking to us don't know how to communicate well, right? And that's part of the reason they may be getting divorced. And in a litigation process, the process itself isn't strong in communication because it's an adversary process where that communication is actually targeted and directed in a negative way. So Adam and Elizabeth will work with them as the divorce coaches to help them communicate what they're trying to say. And that allows me to kind of take that information and help them analyze it and actually attack their fear. To your point, though, most people are trained to think that they need an attorney, right? Everybody mentally, the way when they consider divorce, they go, I need an attorney. I'm going to get an attorney, and I am going to, that person's going to fight for me. And so, and we're not trying to convince everybody that that's not the way to go. Because some people they're just trained that way. I've met people that, you're going to divorce me, I'm going to make you suffer, right? Those are not the people we are trying to work with or that we are able to work with. But what we're trying to do is provide people with an opportunity who say, all right, we don't want to fight. We don't want to go the litigation route. We'd much rather think of an alternative route like mediation. But the problem with mediation is we don't know what we're doing. We don't know, we want something fair, but we don't know how to define it. We don't know how to get to mediation and figure out what are the different outcomes, what are the solutions. And that's kind of where we want to fit and where we want to come in is say, all right, maybe mediation isn't perfect for you right now because you don't know everything or you're not really educated and you don't want to go the litigation route. So what's your option? Okay, we're going to provide you the information to make an educated decision. But to your point, one of the things we have to overcome is just people's mental, the way we've been trained to think that litigation is the way out of a divorce. And I think one of the misconceptions is that, like you said, most people don't wake up one day and think, I want a divorce, right? They've probably spent months or years being unhappy before they get to that point. And what happens, though, in a divorce process or a litigation process quite often is what you do today is going to ultimately affect your future, right? And so just because you get that final judgment or that order from a court that says you're divorced doesn't mean that that's the end of whatever this conflict is, especially if you have children, right? And so how you act today and how you act going through the divorce may dictate how happy or unhappy you are for the next 5, 10, 15 years also. So now I've rambled on, but.
And so Jeremy, like what Adam and I always, what we tell people because we see people at all stages, right? Contemplating divorce, post a horrible litigated divorce, working in parenting issues years after divorce. So what we try to do is help people define what divorce means to their children. So it could be this horrible situation where the parents don't speak, they have to have different teacher conferences. So, I mean, these children cannot have a family that does things in one way. And so instead, we try very much to help rebuild the next foundation and do the next chapter differently. So we encourage the clients to speak and talk, and we give them the tools and skills to do that, hopefully a little better than they did before they walk in our doors.
Yeah. I love what you guys are doing, because in an issue like this, there's so many emotions. And you mentioned earlier about communication being key. So many people don't know how to communicate. And when there's heightened emotions involved, the walls go up and it gets even worse. So this collaborative effort, especially when there's children involved, it just makes a lot of sense to me. So very, very cool. Yeah. And
the other thing, Jeremy, is that when I've been on this road I've been a therapist for longer, but on the divorce side of the divorce professional side for a long time. And what I also noticed is that families were having to you're already taking there's one pie and we're already dividing it into two pies. But then when we talk about extensive fees from the legal process on top of it, people are having to sell their house to pay their divorce professionals that ruined their relationship. So we have a flat fee in order so that people know the cost going into it. So that's one less stressor for the family as they move forward.
I like that flat fee. No crazy hourly attorney fees where you get an email and it breaks down. Oh, we spent 0.2 hours on this thing. It was $100. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. So I want to get into a little bit to the story behind this, because I think you all have interesting backgrounds. You, Elizabeth, and Jon in the mental health space and the counseling space, and then Adam coming in with the forensic accountant and legal background. How did you all link up to come up with this?
Sorry to interrupt you, but before I appreciate you giving me the law degree without going to law school, because that was no worries.
I was bound
to
screw up the names at some point. I got it right at the head of the show, so I could mess it up now. So.
No worries. Listen, I would love to have earned a law degree that quickly. That would be awesome.
And I even made a note here next to Jon's name that says a forensic accountant in law. So go figure. You know what? We're all human, right? Okay, so how did you all link up? Right? Obviously, I'm guessing that. Elizabeth and Adam, you guys knew each other, worked with each other prior to this, but how did you end up doing this? And is this concept that you have, is this something that is unique to you guys, or is this something that's been out there before? How did this thing form?
Well, I think that we all came about it either being a product of divorced family or going through a divorce, or in my case, both. And then through this journey of being a therapist, I saw just that sometimes the divorce itself was the biggest problem in this family relationship, that the actual divorce process, because you're at your most vulnerable during these times of crisis, and there's feelings of abandonment that come for a divorcing family, and spouses who are divorcing, that trigger all of their childhood stuff that's unresolved. And so it was kind of a natural process for me to really want to figure out a way to do it better. But to be honest, it really came to a head. My mom died when I was 27, and my parents divorced when I was 9. And when my dad was not allowed to come to my mom's funeral for lingering problems, and he eventually came, but it was another drama on top of drama, because things, despite the divorce being years, more than a decade before, the pain lingered. And I just felt like there had to be a better way for what in the 70s was a novel experience is now 1 out of 2 families is going to go through this. And so there had to be a better way than traditional litigation, which is not helpful in family preservation.
So I think Elizabeth and Adam met each other maybe personally and then professionally and have worked together for many years professionally. I met Adam and Elizabeth when Elizabeth and I were actually working on a divorce matter together, and I was taking on the accounting role, and Elizabeth was taking on the mental health role. And from there, we started having discussions about our views on the typical divorce process, and what exists and what was lacking. I'm not aware of any other company or people doing exactly this process that we've put together. With that said, if you take the risk and you type in divorce into your phone in Google or something, your social media will be flooded with about 1,000 different divorce things promising you the best life ever at the conclusion with all these fancy adjectives. So, for all I know, there are some people, especially because family law is different in every single state, technically, right? It goes by state law. So, there could be someone like us in California or something else. But in Florida, where we're located, I'm not aware of anyone specifically doing this process. And I would say we've kind of looked at, litigation, collaborative divorce, mediation, picked out all the highlights and tried to create a process that focuses on the positive aspects of these different processes. And in order to be different from all of them also, because we see how a lot of them, what their failures are also.
So are you ever, Jon, with the background in law, do you ever have clients that come together collaboratively and for whatever reason, it becomes contentious during the process and they do need to go seek mediation or actually go to court in front of a judge? Is that something that you also help with, or what happens at that point?
Yeah, all the time there can be breakdowns in any type of process that ultimately lead to litigation and attorneys and judges being involved. When that happens, that's usually because of a breakdown of communication, right? Because again, most people we don't naturally want to fight. We don't want to spend our time fighting, and we certainly don't want to spend a lot of money fighting, right? So inherently, I think we want to avoid it, but sometimes people feel like they get to that point where they don't have a choice anymore. And to say that point doesn't happen, or we can help everybody avoid that, well, that's BS and foolish. But the reality is usually if we can help people continue to communicate and understand where the other person's coming from. And really it's what's the other person's fear? Because again, most of the time most people don't want to punish their spouse. There are people who do, right? You're going to divorce me, I'm going to stick it to you, right? But most people, if you're genuinely coming from a good place, it's not about how you want to hurt someone. You are just afraid of your own self-interest. But usually there's a solution that works for everybody once you understand what each other's fears are. So now to answer your question, yes, there are definitely cases that ultimately go to litigation. We just don't necessarily give up easily until the people make the decision that they feel that that's their best option. And I do a lot of work outside of this also that is regular, litigation based and stuff like that. So I still see it from both sides. This was just an effort to give people another option when they don't want to go the litigation route, but they feel like they don't have enough information to just sit down and figure out what the answer or what the agreement is.
Jeremy, when we lose people to litigation, when that happens, what I can honestly say is that they leave educated and they leave understanding what the family has, both in assets and in debts. So they leave they're better able to talk to their new professionals in an educated way. So we're able to, at least, we always want to settle everything. We don't always settle. Sometimes we actually reconcile and people stay married. So because those are my favorite cases, I have to admit, because they're so wounded and hurt in the beginning, and we are able to give them a safe space to de-escalate those fears. And so they're able to then not come from a place of extreme crisis, and they can make more rational decisions. So even I think that even in those cases that we can't solve in our process, one or both spouses will leave knowing more than they did coming in. And so I still think that's a better, it's a solid reason to give it a shot, for lack of a better.
If there's a breakdown and they're going to meet with their respective attorneys, both people know usually those one or two items that are the real issues, right? And they we can't get over these two humps, but we're going to focus on these two things, as opposed to, we don't need to sit here and focus on all the minutia.
Yeah. So communication obviously is integral to any relationship. One of the things that I've kind of gotten a lot better at in my own relationship with my wife is, when we do have an argument over something, we're both a lot better, as we're getting older, at recognizing the triggers that come up in an emotional conversation. And when you are triggered, instead of letting it get you all hot and bothered and angry, to kind of just acknowledge the fact that an emotion is coming up. And even if you need some time, it's like, oh, you can just communicate that to your partner and say, like, hey, give me just a few minutes to calm myself down and clear my head, and take a lot of that rage or passion out of it when you're, because you feel the emotions come, right? It's something that's been an issue for many, many, many years, and it comes up and you just feel it under your skin, and you feel the anxiety come. You're like, oh, not that again. And I just have to say, I often ask myself, I'm like, what? That's an interesting emotion. What are you trying to tell me? And I have a dialogue with the feelings I'm having, and in that dialogue, the feelings magically disappear, and it's like, oh, that went away. And it's getting quicker and quicker the more work I put into it from my end. Like in the past, I used to have arguments and wouldn't talk for a week. It's just ridiculous. Kids would see us. It's like, what's going on with it? And it just doesn't happen anymore, right? The recovery period from any argument is drastically smaller than it was in the past. So communication is key for sure.
And it sounds like you've learned. Right. And a lot of times,
got a long way to go
before they learn that, if they get to us, they have Adam and Elizabeth to, instead of yelling at their spouse, they can yell at Elizabeth or Adam. Just kidding. Right. But the Adam and Elizabeth will help them kind of work through that and understand. And that's why we don't know where this is going to go. Sometimes it's people learn about themselves and the ability to communicate and what they need to make them happy. And then they decide, because sometimes people come to us because they don't know what they want, but they just don't know what to do next. Sorry, Adam, go ahead.
No. Jeremy, I really appreciate sort of your description of how you use your emotions to kind of inform you and not direct you, right? Yeah. And so as humans, we don't always make the most constructive decisions when we are fueled by really strong emotions. And so, part of what you talked about is kind of not ignoring them, because that doesn't really work. Not allowing them to take over, because that rarely leads to good outcomes. But you talked about kind of having a dialogue with them and using them to inform you. And that's really a large part of our process, is about helping people to manage this really highly emotional space. Very few people get here in a calm, cool, collected space. They are often juggling a lot of highly charged emotions. And so I really appreciate the way you laid that out, because I think that that's an incredibly intuitive way to navigate that stuff.
Yeah, it only took me like 44 some odd years to get there. and I still got a hell of a long way to go on this journey. Learning something new every day. And yeah, isn't this journey beautiful?
And then the minute you think you got it and you nailed it, right, there's a curveball. It's like, oh man.
Yeah. Such is life. Yeah, no, I had that recently. I do a lot of personal growth and development work on myself, and I'd been doing it for probably 4 years, and I wasn't seeing as much progress as I would have hoped for. And I'd always beat myself up over it. Like, is this even working? What's going on? And then something kicked in and I was like, yeah, like it is working. And I was like, I got this now. And just like you said, without fail, I was rudely awakened and reminded that, nope, you got a lot of work left to do. And I still go through it quite often, but that's just part of the process, isn't it, guys?
Yeah.
Exactly. 100%.
So on the subject of family, since we're talking about families, I know, Elizabeth, you shared a little bit about your background. Why don't we go through, everybody talk a little bit. I mean, family is usually the driving force behind everybody and everything we do in life. I know I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old myself, and man, is time just buzzing by. It seems like they're going to be gone in a blink. So why don't you start off, Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about your family.
Sure. I have 3 biological boys, 27, 25, 21, and an almost stepdaughter who's 19. And
had to get the daughter in there.
I said I only had to get divorced, and that's how hard I worked for a daughter. I had to get divorced to do that. And I have an incredible partner, and quite honestly, a phenomenal relationship with my ex-husband. And really, my family's everything. And what I always remember is that, our kids get one mom and one dad. The mom and the dad might not keep each other, but we're all our children have. And so to me, just in having been a product of that, and having had a really good woman and a really good man get really bad advice. And like I said, it was in the 70s, can't really hold their professionals to blame. Nobody knew what we know now. And so I think that, all of everything that I do is truly, for the people who I love. And I think that I'm really lucky, to be honest, because my work family, you're looking at my 2 work husbands, it's all about understanding each other's perspective and listening. And Jim, you've done whatever personal growth and development you're doing, like, hats off to the people that you're learning from, because what you say is really meaningful and powerful.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband and I have been together about 20 years. And while we don't have kids, we both have incredibly large and connected families. And like Elizabeth, my parents divorced when I was a young adult. And I now can watch them show up for myself and the rest of my family as kind and compassionate humans, which I know isn't where they started in that process, because I watched a bit of that unfold. And so, I really value family and the connections that come from it. And I think that's part of the reason I do what I do in helping families to kind of navigate this stuff. And so, it's a large part of where I come from. How about you, Jon?
Way to transition there.
We saved the best for last.
No pressure. It's not really the best. But I'm married. I have a 13-year-old daughter. We are very typical close family. I laugh, though, all the time when I listen to clients and people, complain about their spouse. And I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar. To me, like what my wife would say to me, not that I would ever complain. But I'm like, yeah, I get it. And I think my why would be, if I had to be maybe a little dramatic. So my dad died when I was 1, and I didn't kind of grow up with that, the normal kind of intact family. But I think what I took from that is that life is really short, and you never know what's going to happen.
Indeed. Right.
And so it's like, I don't understand why we spend so much time fighting in animosity and in anger, right? And so I have a really tough time accepting that. And I think that's what motivates me, at least as it relates to family law and divorce, is it's like to help people kind of get past these roadblocks, because life is short. And, don't, like we said earlier, you probably spent a lot of time being unhappy before you ever meet anyone like Adam and Elizabeth and I. How can we speed this up and get you to that place where you could start to be happy, focus on yourself, really work on your own personal growth? Because a lot of times what happens, I think, and why people wind up talking to us or wanting to get divorced, one, it's a breakdown in communication, and two, it's that they lose their own personal growth. Like, they lose sight of how can they make themselves a better person? What can they be doing to make themselves happy, right? And they become so focused on other people and other responsibilities, they lose sight of themselves. And so those are the things that I think really excite me about what we're trying to do, is to kind of get people to refocus on themselves and on being happy and remembering life is short, and most of the shit that we're fighting over isn't worth it.
100%. Yeah, I recognized recently, probably a year ago, maybe within a year ago, it's not easy to do, but I don't want to suffer involuntarily anymore. Like, I want to control when I suffer. I want to suffer over the things that I choose to suffer over, whether it's exercising, physical labor, or leaning into a new skill, or learning something that's painful in many ways and can be construed as suffering, but not this involuntary suffering where you just can't control it and it comes up. And obviously there's places for that when it comes to grief, and loss of loved ones and things like that. But I've been really cognizant of trying to avoid this needless suffering, because, man, life is incredibly short. And even more so now I always say I'm on the north side of 40 now. Like, everything is getting real. It's getting quicker and quicker, and time just seems to go by quicker.
And your listeners who are older than you right now are like, Jeremy, shut up. Stop complaining. 44, whatever. Like, give me a break.
Yeah. No,
I'm a new 30.
I'm still a spring chicken, right? So I wanted to ask all of you, this is something interesting in my mind. You mentioned what 1 in 2 nowadays, I think is it 1 in 2 marriages fail nowadays? 50% roughly is the divorce rate. Obviously it wasn't like that in years past. What do you think is one of the bigger or biggest contributing factors to that? Is this a function of people getting married too early? Just the world we live in right now? There's just so much noise and distractions. This breakdown of the family unit, right? Like, I don't think people sit down anymore to have dinner with their kids and their family. I
think that's a part of it. I also think, I think the grass is. People are much more convinced the grass is greener, and there's a lot more opportunity now. So I think if you go back when people were in a different time, maybe our parents' time, there wasn't social media, there wasn't cell phones, there wasn't internet, there wasn't dating sites, right? People would, go to work and maybe they meet someone out. But I just think there's so many more temptations that it's easier when people are unhappy or not in a good place in their marriage to try to find that grass is greener. And as a result, that's my kind of view,
instead of doing the hard work and becoming better at communicating and personal growth and development, 100%. It's easier to just go do something and get instant gratification somewhere else. Yeah, that makes sense. What's your take, Elizabeth?
So I think a lot of different things. I think that we're living a lot longer. I think we have many more like iterations and chapters. Like, who you are when you're 20 isn't necessarily who you are when you're 40 or when you're 60. And thanks to the advent of pharmaceutical assistance, we're expecting our relationships, our romantic and love and sexual relationships to last for a lot longer, not just about having kids. So our expectations on our romantic life has increased. I think our longevity has increased. Obviously, opportunities have increased. We have people both in a typical heterosexual relationship. Both people are working outside of the house, as opposed to like in the 40s, 50s, 60s when we had one wage earner in a family. There are so many different situations. And I think that, my goal is to make divorce less negative. And when people are parents, understand that you're parents for life. You're not necessarily spouses for life. But because you chose to have a child or children, you are now responsible to find a way to get along with the person you chose to have a child with. Other than that, I think really, if we can do that, and they do that a lot better in Europe than we do here in America, like if we can do that, then staying in a relationship that you have no longer anything in common with just for the sake of being a family with this person isn't as necessary. So I don't think we can blame one thing. I think we have to look at the fact that we're shifting from like a marital archetype, which was about two people coming together to be stronger because they couldn't be as strong apart, to more of like a spiritual connection with the people that we're choosing at that time, if that makes any sense.
Well said. Adam, what say you, sir?
I'll chime in a little bit, but I agree a lot with what both Jon and Elizabeth laid out. In addition, the tools and the strategies and the skills we use to get us into relationships aren't necessarily the ones that keep us in them. And it's when I look back at my early adult self, it looks a little different. And my hope is that the current self is a little bit more wise, knowledgeable, and has a few more tools in the shed. But like Elizabeth and Jon have said, that the time that we spend in these relationships, our own identity changes, our needs change, our sense of who we are, what we want, what we're looking for can change. And navigating that with a partner, going back to something you said before, Jeremy, about your own work on communication, requires a lot of really good communication skills with your partner. And so it's a challenge when we are, partnering in our 20s and 30s and living to our 70s and 80s to spend 50 years navigating that stuff with another human. And, as both Jon and Elizabeth talked about, the sort of things that are pulling us outside of marriages these days have exponentially increased from generations ago. And so figuring out how to navigate all of that is not an easy task by any stretch.
Yeah, indeed. Something just came to my mind. I had a thought. Obviously, in a relationship, there's going to be things that bother you with your significant other. There's going to be things you love about them, things you don't like about them. I remember something came up for me with my wife where something that did bother me about her, it came to my mind, and I actually felt a deep feeling of love for this thing that I kind of thought I hated about her. And I realized that even though I don't like that thing, it's still part of who she is. And I embraced that. And I was like, I still love like every part of that. And I think that's really important to really embrace and love, because you don't want the person to change who they are for you. There's certain aspects of them that you just have to lean into and embrace and accept that. I think we want to have a positive relationship with somebody. So anyway, those are just my 2 cents.
That's huge. Yeah. I think that's huge. And if you try to force them to change,
a lot of resentment there.
Yeah, you'll call us. Exactly, right? Because that's where the resentment comes from. That's where people start to get unhappy and they go on this downward slope, right? That's very hard to get out of. Right? Yeah. So it's appreciating those differences and trying to have to love the differences or love the thing that annoys you. But that is, to your point, a part of the person you've decided to love. So.
Yeah. And I think when you approach that from a place of love and understanding and you communicate well, your partner will be a lot more apt to improve on that part of themselves that does bother you without you kind of getting upset with them over it. And there'll be no resentment there, and they'll want to grow and become better for you as opposed to in spite of you.
Right. Like Elizabeth says,
no one. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Jon.
I think Elizabeth says a lot, like no one prepares us for marriage, right? it's kind of something that we know is coming. We're kind of taught like this is the process of life. And all of a sudden you get to that point where the next question is, are you getting married? Right? And the question after that is, are you having kids?
Children.
Did you buy a house? Right? But no one prepares you for what that actually means. So to kind of go back to your point, people are getting divorced more frequently because we don't know who we are going to be, and we don't know what marriage is actually going to mean to us or what it's supposed to mean. And we evolve over time. And some people decide to put in the work, and other people decide to, the grass is greener.
Yeah. So this has been great. I really appreciated getting to know all of you and learn about what you do. Anybody out there that's listening that is going through a rocky time, they're having issues in their relationship, communication, and what we're talking about is resonating with them, how can they reach you? How could they learn more? What's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
We have a website that is InDivorce.com. And that's probably the best because we're the best place to reach us. And then typically either one of us will reach out depending on, what you're looking for. And we always offer a free conversation, like basically what we gave to you. we give to everybody who calls us because we want our clients to want to do this process, as opposed to, because it is encouraging you to be the best version of yourself. It's when you're angry and you're hurt and we all think that we're the one that was wronged, all of us, until we talk to the other person. And so when we're in that space, it's hard to make the best decisions. So we always say, like, come talk to us, see if this is a fit for you. If it's not a fit for you, no harm, no foul. And we're here, we're not going anywhere unless you're Jon and Adam and they take way more fun vacations than me. Just kidding. But I just go visit my kids all over the country. But really, I think that we're here to help you and to help and so come consult with us, see if this fits for you. And if not, that's okay. That's okay.
So we're located kind of in the Cooper City, Fort Lauderdale area. We can meet people in person. We can meet them, online. They can get to us through our website, InDivorce.com. They can email Elizabeth, Adam, or myself at InDivorce.com. So
just our first
Adam at InDivorce.com. 954-780-8247. Can also reach us by phone. And like Elizabeth said, we've got to make sure that we're the right process and people for them. And, and we also need to make sure that they're the right people for our process, because our goal is not to lead people down a road that's going to reach a dead end. There's certainly, a mind frame that works for our process and people that we can help. And so it's not going to be for everybody, but for anyone that it can be, we obviously want to help them.
Well, we will, of course, link in the description below to all of your contact information. Hopefully, I won't be reaching out to you guys for professional help anytime soon, but knock on wood, you never know what happens. But no,
I'm just gonna help your wife, honestly. If anyone ever come and be like, "Oh, you're Jeremy's wife," well, that guy.
Good stuff, guys. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Again, it was a pleasure getting the opportunity to meet you and learn about what you're doing for our great community through your business. I really, really love the concept. I hope that it resonated with our listeners, and I'm glad to kind of get the message out for you guys in the community. So truly, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And thanks, as always, to our listeners for tuning in, and we will catch you all next time on the next episode of the Good Neighbor Podcast. Everyone, take care, have a wonderful day, and stay blessed. And go easy on yourself. Would you? We only got this one life to live. Let's go.
That's right.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast, Cooper City. To nominate your favorite local business to be featured on the show, go to gnpcoopercity.com. That's gnpcoopercity.com, or call 954 231-3170.